and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And in this episode, we are going to review the 2012 film The Dark Knight Rises, directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Christian Bale. We're doing this throwback review now because, for once, there's actually nothing new coming out from Marvel and DC, and we thought that this movie was a great option considering that we have the Catwoman Hunted movie coming out here soon, and it's just a great movie in general.
Yeah, it's the last film in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight saga that we have to review. We've already reviewed Batman Begins. We've already reviewed The Dark Knight. So I've been looking forward to reviewing this film for a while. I can't believe it's already 10 years old.
That's crazy. And when I said that the film was great, I should say mostly great. But we'll talk all about the film later on this episode.
You can say great. It's fine. It's fine.
Before that, we're going to get into the comic book movie news that came out in the past week, which there was not a lot of. We are expecting to get a Moon Knight trailer here soon, but we'll probably talk about that next week. For this episode, we'll be discussing the first official look at Leslie Grace as Batgirl.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic. If you're listening to us on Spotify, please rate us there. Spotify recently unveiled listener ratings on the Spotify app. To rate, simply visit our show page and click on the star rating button below our show description.
And don't forget, guys, we have a Patreon page where we offer bonus content, including bonus episodes and duels, monthly live movie watch-alongs, collectible pin sets, and access to our Discord server. If you want to hear Jonathan and I count down the top 10 heroes that have yet to make a live-action appearance, we're going to be releasing that bonus episode this Saturday, so go ahead and join up. Again, our lowest tier is only $2 a month. But with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize. A No Prize is an award that Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post on social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question was, what do you think will be the lowest grossing Marvel or DC film in 2022? And that was coming off of the previous week's question where we asked you guys what you thought the highest grossing would be. Literally everyone who called in gave the same answer, except for one, and they were the No Prize winner. But let's go ahead and break down our honorable mentions. It was really hard to choose honorable mentions, again, because you guys all gave the same answer. But yeah, we kind of picked them at random here. So first honorable mention goes to Chumnu, who said,
"Hey guys, this is Chumnu, and I think the least grossing film will be Marvel's Morbius, because in the business world, we're always talking about flying high, diving hard, and crashing deep, and that's what DC has got going. They got their, big projects, Aquaman and Batman, while, Morbius has a small fan base, pretty obscure, and I feel like it's delving into a genre not a lot of, the general public won't receive well, and yeah.
And yeah, he's right. Morbius is a pretty obscure character. I think if you're not a comic reader, most people are familiar with the character through, Spider-Man Saturday morning cartoon that he used to have in the 90s.
Yeah, and because of that, he doesn't have a large fan base. A lot of the success of these films seems to stem on the brand of the character. If the brand is well known, people will go see it because they trust it to be good. Morbius actually does have a great backstory, but do I believe Sony is going to represent that in any sort of satisfactory way? Not really, considering what they did with Carnage. Carnage also had a great backstory. And you can listen to our dual episodes with Morbius and Man-Bat and Carnage and Lobo by pouring through our show's episodes.
Our next honorable mention goes to DC Joe, who also said,
"Hey guys, DC Joe here. I think the lowest grossing movie of 2022 will be Morbius, for the simple fact that Sony was willing to release it in January. January being notorious as a dumping ground for movie studios with movies that they are not confident will make back money."
Totally great point. A lot of blockbuster money-making films are either released in the summer, between Memorial Day and Labor Day, or during the Christmas frame. Every other time typically has been a dumping ground for films that studios don't think a lot of people will go to the theaters to see. January is one of those worst times, and the fact that Sony even considered putting Morbius there just goes to show they don't have a lot of faith in that project.
That said, October is also shaping up to be a pretty big money-making month, and January and February are also shaping up to be big award months. Oftentimes what studios are doing now is that they will release their film in limited release late in the year and then increase the number of theaters the movie plays in at the start of the year so they don't have to compete with, whatever holiday blockbuster is out.
Do you think that's happening with Morbius? Do you think
Hell
they
no.
put it in limited release at the end of the year?
No way. No, I'm just saying that there's actually some pretty good movies that hit theaters in January, like The Tragedy of Macbeth, I think that's a good example from this year.
Our next honorable mention goes to Harrison Fox, who said,
Hey guys, Harrison Fox here. I think the movie that's going to perform the worst is going to be Morbius. 1, Sony's track record with these live action movies has not been great. 2, the movie's been shifted a billion times and people are probably losing interest. And 3, it's going against the heavy hitters like Thor and Batman, Flash. Those movies are just going to dominate. And Morbius, I really don't think has a chance.
oh yeah, there's a ton of great Marvel and DC movies coming out this year. Ones that a lot of people are really excited for. And when you see the competition that Morbius has, you got to say, yeah, okay, maybe it's not going to stack up.
I know me personally, whatever little interest I had in watching Morbius is pretty much completely gone with these constant release date shifts.
Yeah, I feel like the movie's just going to get released without most of the general public even being aware of it.
We want to give a quick thanks to Corey Wooten, Jacob Bell, and Paolo for taking the time to visit our website and record an answer. But the winner of this week's No Prize is Richard McGrew, who said,
Hey guys, Rick from Retronomapod. I think the movie that's going to gross the least in 2022 is going to be DC's League of Super Pets. I think that one's going to make some money, but not nearly as much as everybody else.
That's right, everybody. The correct answer was DC League of Super Pets.
I'm actually really surprised that no one else came up with this answer, because this was actually the answer I thought most people would give, and I figured it was going to be the winning answer. It's a children's film, its demographic is pretty narrow, and honestly, if COVID keeps up the way it is, I wouldn't be surprised if they released this straight to HBO Max.
Yeah, kids' movies do have potential to garner mass earnings, like look at the Incredibles films or something like that. If you look at the trailer for DC League of Super Pets, it looks a little substandard, shall we say. I don't think a whole lot of adults are going to see this movie. I don't know if families are going to go to this in droves. Considering the pandemic, I just don't see it earning as much as Morbius. I think it'll be close between the two, though. That being said, I think another great contender for lowest box office actually pains me to say it is Black Adam.
Well, I'm sorry, what? It's The Rock.
Yeah, but I mean, look at a movie like Jungle Cruise, which didn't get that much despite the fact that it starred him.
It's a pandemic.
But Black Adam, he's an anti-hero / villain character, primarily known for his association with Shazam. I think marketing-wise, they're going to struggle with that film when you're trying to pitch it to someone and you're going to tell them oh, it's a Shazam villain. And they're going to be like, oh, so Zachary Levi is going to be in the movie. And they're going to be like, no, this has nothing to do with that. So they're going to be like, I don't read the comics. I don't know anything about this character.
You are way off base. This film's going to have the Justice Society in it?
Yeah, but nobody knows who that is either.
Fuck you.
I think it's going to have it's going to have an uphill battle marketing-wise, I think. Primarily because of that Shazam association.
I think The Rock has a huge-ass social media following, and all of those people are going to go see it. Because he's been hyping up this role for almost a decade now. Over a decade.
Yeah, but does the general public know who Black Adam is? Again, it's all about brand.
Probably not. They're probably going to be like, so is he black? A lot of people didn't know who Guardians of the Galaxy were either. A lot of people didn't know who a ton of these superhero characters were. But they'll go see them if The Rock is playing them.
Pretend like I'm just your average moviegoer, doesn't read comics, doesn't really know much about him. Tell me about Black Adam. How would you pitch it to me?
So, the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
You already lost me. I don't know what that means. Get out of my face. All I'm saying is, don't be surprised if Black Adam underperforms. It'll most definitely still make more than Morbius.
I guarantee it.
Congrats again to Richard McGrew for winning this week's No Prize. Go listen to his podcast, the Retronomicon Podcast, aka the Retronomapod. And if you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. And now that that's done,
on to the news. Okay, so during last year's DC Fandom event, we got our first concept art look of Leslie Grace as Batgirl. It was pretty much in shadows. We didn't get to see her face. Still pretty cool looking, though. She was on a gargoyle. Good sign. Now that the film has actually started production, there have been some leaked photos giving us our first look of Leslie Grace as Barbara Gordon. And now on social media, we have our first official look at the character in costume.
and reactions are mixed.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it is very, very comic accurate. It's almost a one-to-one translation of Batgirl's Burnside costume that was made popular in her New 52 comics run. I really like it.
I like the design and I like the silhouette, but I don't like the material usage. One of the criticisms levied at the suit is that it looks like she's cosplaying as the character largely because the suit looks fairly cheap. And I agree. It looks like this weird pleather diaper material that she's wearing.
Dude, you've never changed a diaper before in your life. You have no idea what diaper material looks like. This is not
It looks
that.
squishy. It looks like she could shit her pants and then continue fighting crime.
That's important, dude. That's important when you're fighting crime to be able to do that. Look at Iron Man.
It's just squishy. If I had to describe the outfit in one word, I would say squishy.
I would say that it kind of looks like she made it from a duvet cover. You know, it's extra padding, as it were.
That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
I know. But, you know, I also think that she's just starting out. You know, if you remember in the Batman animated series, Barbara Gordon made her own costume initially when she wanted to pretend like she was Batman there as well. That's part of the character's origin. She's inspired by Batman, and so she wants to go out and protect the streets, sort of like him, but she doesn't have the same resources as he does, you know? Honestly, I prefer this much more to, like, Alicia Silverstone's costume, where it's all sculpted
That's
and
not even a
rubber.
comparison.
It is a
I mean-
comparison. It's the only comparison to make. That's the only time she's been in a live-action film.
Well, they're both not good.
Well, I feel like a lot of people are saying they would have preferred that. And I'm like, nah, bud. Like, give her, like, the leather jacket from the Burnside comics. That's a much cooler look. She even has, like, the yellow boots. That's badass. And I gotta say, the background is also pretty interesting. It is very, like, Gothic inspired.
She does cast a pretty cool shadow on that stone wall.
Hell
say
yeah,
that.
she does. Yeah.
So as long as the entire movie is done in shadow puppets, I think it'll be pretty good. I'll say that Lizzie Grace herself looks good.
She does look good. She looks really good as Barbara Gordon. I was a little hesitant, but now I'm totally sold.
She just needs a better outfit.
And maybe she will. If I'm being honest, I thought that this suit was going to be much more tech-based, considering the rumors that Michael Keaton was going to sort of play like a Batman Beyond Bruce Wayne mentor figure to her and sort of equip her. I'm definitely not saying that here, but that doesn't mean that can't happen over the course of the film. Barbara Gordon has always been a tech-slanted figure, so I wouldn't be surprised if she got some upgrades in this movie. Maybe it's wishful thinking. I don't know.
We'll have to see what happens.
You know what I feel like you're doing? I feel like you're underestimating the costume. Leslie Grace left a pretty good comment with her post of the photo. That was a quote from Batgirl Year One, and it was, "I use their expectations against them. That will be their weakness, not mine. Let them all underestimate me, and when their guard is down and their pride is rising, let me kick their butts." Leslie Grace is going to kick your butt in this role.
I mean, usually I have pretty good instincts about these things, but fair enough.
We don't have an official release date for this film yet. We do know that it's scheduled to come out this year exclusively on HBO Max. I'm kind of hoping they decide to push that to movie theaters as well, like what they did with Blue Beetle. But I'm not holding my breath because I know that HBO Max still wants, you know, some exclusive content on their platform.
But speaking of female superhero costumes, that brings us to our question of the week.
Who's had the best costume out of Marvel and DC's live-action female characters?
That could be television, it could be movies, just live action, female, best costume. No pervy shit, okay? Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message can be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media. Be sure to answer before January 22nd. But I think that does it for all the news for this episode, so let's go ahead and get into our main event, where we discuss Christopher Nolan's 2012 DC film, The Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight Rises was the 2012 sequel to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, concluding director Christopher Nolan's epic Batman trilogy. Christopher Nolan, who wrote the film with his brother Jonathan, declared in the promotional interviews and presentations prior to the film's release that every great story deserves a great ending. And make no mistake, despite the film's minor faults, it is a great, epic ending to the Dark Knight trilogy. Like our Batman Begins and Dark Knight film reviews, we will be talking about spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the film, make sure not to ruin this great ending for yourself.
Hard to believe that the movie's been out for 10 years now, but given that, if you haven't seen the film, where have you been?
Yeah, what are you, 9 years old? So it's hard to convey just how excited I was for this film when I heard it was being made. I, like so many others, were overwhelmed by how good The Dark Knight was, and I felt like everyone was a Batman fan at that time, and I ate up every bit of news and marketing that was put out for this sequel to try and get a handle of what the story would be. As Batman fans of the time used to say, in Nolan we trust. And I absolutely trusted him to deliver us a story that would top The Dark Knight. I wouldn't say Nolan was successful in that regard. The Dark Knight is better than The Dark Knight Rises, and I think Christopher Nolan lost quite a bit of trust from fans because of that, which he hasn't yet recovered from. But I will say that Rises is still successful in that it's a masterfully crafted, mostly satisfying, and surprisingly emotional conclusion to Nolan's Dark Knight saga.
I mean, like, how are you going to follow up The Dark Knight, right?
Right?
It was a 5-star film as we rated it. It was a flawless movie. It changed not only the genre, but filmmaking in general. A stellar piece of writing, stellar performances. It couldn't be topped. That was the thing. I think everybody's expectations for The Dark Knight Rises were way too high and perhaps unrealistic. This movie tried to succeed in every aspect that The Dark Knight did and fell short. That is to say, a bad Christopher Nolan movie is still going to be better than most other movies out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think another reason why you really couldn't top The Dark Knight is because you didn't have Heath Ledger as the Joker. You know, he was a big reason for why that film was so good. And with his death, we couldn't get him back.
Well, the Joker was never going to play a big role in this movie anyway, though.
Well, he was originally supposed to. When Batman Begins, scribe David S. Goyer wrote a story treatment for The Dark Knight, he originally split the story into 2 parts, planning for the Joker to throw acid into Harvey Dent's face, creating Two-Face in the 3rd film of the trilogy. Christopher and Jonathan Nolan squeezed all of that into one film, however, leaving Christopher Nolan initially at something of a loss when it came to telling another Batman story after The Dark Knight's success and the death of Heath Ledger. But other cast members have gone on to say that, yeah, the Joker was supposed to return for a 3rd film if they ever made one. Nolan has said that he knew if he was going to return to the franchise after The Dark Knight, that he wanted to finish the story for good that he had started in Batman Begins, which of course told the origin of how and why Bruce Wayne became Batman. To finish that story, you'd have to explain the how and why Bruce Wayne would stop being Batman, which isn't easy, since any comic reader can attest Batman is probably one of the most dedicated characters in literature.
And enduring. You know, I don't think I've ever read a Batman retirement story. I've read plenty of stories where Batman came out of retirement, but the fact that Nolan chose to end this story by having the hero no longer be the hero, especially when, you know, he's still fairly young, kind of made me feel like he just didn't quite get the character, I guess. That was probably the most unsatisfying part about the film.
Yeah, maybe you could definitely make that argument. But as far as retirement goes, you know, there have been instances in the comics where Bruce Wayne couldn't be Batman or, you know, retired his mantle, and Nolan decided to draw upon those storylines, specifically Nightfall and The Dark Knight Returns, for inspiration. Batman was paralyzed by Bane in Nightfall, and he started out retired in The Dark Knight Returns. The ultimate conclusion to every character's story, however, is death. And this film explores Batman's war on crime from a Thanatonic approach that was kind of surprising to me. Like, superhero adventures often involve some element of mortality. Like, after all, if the hero's life isn't at stake, how heroic is the character actually? But prior to this film, I'd never really considered the psychology of Batman, and that he was not only willing to die for his cause, but really deep down would not have chosen to die any other way, now that his way out of the role, Rachel Dawes, was dead.
Yeah, they never really addressed this kind of death wish that Bruce Wayne seemingly had until this film. And for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. We see that he's kind of like done with the role. And then when he chooses to get back in, Alfred's like, don't do it, man. You're going to die. And you want to die. We all know you want to die. And I'm like, what?
He knew that he could potentially be killed going up against Bane. He knew how formidable Bane was. I didn't like the idea of Batman wanting to die the first time I watched the film. But in thinking about it for this review, it makes his retirement at the beginning of the film all the more tragic. Like when Bane said to Batman, "Victory has defeated you," he's not just talking about Bruce's muscle atrophy. The Dent Act made Batman obsolete and robbed Bruce Wayne of his heroic death.
That was also very interesting. The fact that they chose to basically render him useless for 8 years. This film definitely made a lot of choices that I think they pull off mainly within the narrative they're trying to tell, but are largely questionable to the Batman mythos in general. Things like a peaceful Gotham City, Batman retiring, an exiled Batman, things like that.
Well, I think as a comic book reader, as a Batman fan, those ideas weren't too foreign considering, we saw those things in The Dark Knight Returns. We saw those things in No Man's Land, like you mentioned. Gotham was peaceful during Batman's retirement in The Dark Knight Returns, somewhat. You had your mutant gangs and stuff like that, but the Joker was catatonic. You didn't have like all of the really, really colorful supervillains out there, just like some punk-ass kids.
Oh, okay.
I used to think that this movie's setup was that Bruce Wayne had been retired for 8 years because Rachel Dawes and Harvey Dent died. I thought that was pretty dumb because Batman's a character that's actually driven further by the death and pain of loved ones, whether it's his parents or Jason Todd or Barbara Gordon getting shot by the Joker. He's not one to give into despair, and he didn't. He gave into depression because it's peacetime and he feels useless with his injured knee and broken body. It was all there in the film, but because, like most of Nolan's films, the story is so complex and moves forward at such a steady clip that it's a challenge to stay on top of all of the information that you're constantly being bombarded with. People often accuse Nolan's films of being boring, when in reality, I think that they're actually just exhausting because of the constant exposition and story that's coming your way. Yeah, if Nolan didn't take this approach, there's no way he'd be able to tell the amount of story he wants to tell in one of his movies. And if you're able to keep up, the stories are pretty wonderful and immensely satisfying.
That's one of the problems I have with Nolan in general, is that his films have very little hand-holding, which can be good for the very astute viewer who picks up everything on their first viewing. But it's bad for general audiences who occasionally need a reminder or so about what's going on. Like you take elements in this movie like the nuclear bomb, where all of a sudden they start talking about this clean energy project. It seems to come out of nowhere, doesn't really mean anything to the audience at its first mention, but it's not until later that you actually see what the hell they're talking about when you see the actual reactor.
Right.
I think Nolan needs to do a little bit more hand-holding in that we should have seen at least like some kind of shot of the reactor so we know that, this is an element that actually plays a huge important role within this film. It's not just a passing reference. It's not wasted dialogue.
I don't think any of the dialogue is wasted, but I don't think you realize that until subsequent viewings of the film.
Yeah.
I picked up a lot during this last time I watched the film because I had the subtitles on. And that was the first time I had ever watched the film with subtitles.
Same here. Yeah, I felt like I got so much more out of this most recent viewing.
Yeah.
Again, this was only my second time seeing the film.
What?
But like
That's
the
right.
first time, I just remember thinking that these people are not speaking like how normal people speak, The dialogue borders on overwritten.
I don't know. I would disagree with that. I think the dialogue is sort of molded into almost like this perfect poetic prose.
And that makes it seem more like Shakespeare than your standard conversation.
Which I love. Give me some Shakespeare any day, every day. That stuff is epic as hell. And I love the fact that Christopher Nolan doesn't hold your hands. I love films for smart people. I didn't catch everything the first time I saw this film, but I caught enough to know that I still really liked it. And I don't mind rewatching it. I don't mind picking up new stuff each time. It's part of the fun.
The subtitles also helped with, and we'll probably talk about this more later, Bane's voice. There were some things that he said that I never understood. Like when he was like, "I'm on your schedule, agent guy," or something like that. I forgot what he said.
Yeah.
But I totally got that now.
We'll definitely talk about that in our character breakdown.
Of course we will. Of course.
Another exhausting aspect of Nolan's films, however, though The Dark Knight probably is a better example of this, and I think we mentioned it in that review, is that even before we hit the halfway mark of the film, it enters a near continuous state of climax after climax after climax. Mm-hmm. Near the 1 hour and 15-minute mark of The Dark Knight Rises, when most other films would be close to wrapping up, Batman finally finds Bane, and they fight. Then before you know it, Bruce Wayne's on the other side of the planet, and we have brand new conflicts regarding a prison escape and a nuclear bomb, and death is around every corner, and we still have about an hour and a half of the film left. Now, don't get me wrong, I love episodic sagas, like The Godfather, like The Ten Commandments, like Zack Snyder's Justice League, but those films aren't as consistently intense as The Dark Knight Rises. And I think that's both a good and bad thing, depending on what mood and state of mind you're in. The first time I saw it, like I mentioned, I loved it, and I think anytime you're invested in the film and finding new things that you may have missed before, the film's pacing isn't as taxing, at least for me personally.
Yeah, but if you're not, this movie drags. It feels like 2 or 3 movies in one.
Because it is. That's the way Nolan approaches his films. The Dark Knight felt the same way, because it was literally 2 films squeezed into one. Here, you have multiple stories squeezed into one. Again, Nightfall, No Man's Land, Dark Knight Returns. So it's not surprising that it feels so robust. Like I mentioned, I definitely noticed quite a bit more in my most recent viewing. One of those things being how relevant the film still feels in the current zeitgeist. Like, the film was almost done shooting by the time Occupy Wall Street started. That was the first time I'd ever heard terms like the 1% or saw protests regarding social and economic inequality. Then I saw people rioting in this film, pulling the 1% into the streets, and suddenly, within the past couple of years, I've seen footage of protests and riots at least once a month, mostly over social and economic inequality around the world. I've seen many critics try to pin a political message to this film, but it was made before any of this stuff was as prevalent as it is today on Twitter.
Yeah, the speech that Catwoman gave where she's like, a storm is coming and you guys will wonder how you ever lived with so much while the rest of us had so little. I was like, oh, yeah, that's something I definitely didn't really dwell too much on the first time I heard that, but it definitely hits differently now.
Yeah, maybe I was just, a lot more unaware back when I was in my mid-20s. Actually, I definitely know I was. But I definitely picked up more about the socio-political aspects of this film this time around than prior.
I almost feel like that angle to the film was better than Bane's angle. Bane did provoke this sort of attack on the wealthy and everything like that. It didn't quite make sense how it aligned with Selena Kyle's views. I think that was just a coincidence, but I never really got the sense from other Gothamites that they were trying to bring down the rich. It seemed like it was mostly just Bane's mercenaries causing chaos, and therefore didn't really fill the theme as well as I would have liked.
Well, I definitely think we didn't see as much of the down-on-the-luck Gothamites that we had seen in Batman Begins, like in the Narrows. But I think that sentiment, that class divide, has always been really prevalent in Gotham. Just maybe not so much this film specifically where it needed to be, but definitely in the larger universe in this 3-film saga. This whole class warfare angle was actually inspired by Charles Dickens' book A Tale of Two Cities, which is set during the French Revolution. Nolan has stated that that book was his inspiration for this film. And he even included the closing lines of the book in Commissioner Gordon's eulogy during Bruce Wayne's funeral.
Do you think it was a little strange that Bane disingenuously claimed to be a man of the people when in fact really had nothing to do with his plan? He was going to blow up the city because of the League of Shadows' goal to purge corruption throughout history?
It absolutely was disingenuous. He was just trying to stir up revolution and chaos.
Does that make sense to you, considering the ultimate goal? They should have just blown up the city if that's what their plan was.
He was breaking Bruce Wayne's soul. He wanted Bruce Wayne to see his city in turmoil.
But I mean, I'm sure he'd still be really sad if he just blew up the fucking city,
Dude, Bane and Talia are probably like the most patient supervillains in superhero cinema history.
I know, right?
Very patient. Talia had to wait like 8 years just to like talk with Bruce Wayne about this fusion generator thing or whatever. You know? Long time. It's a long time.
And then hope that there was some scientist out there that would figure out a way to turn it into a bomb, all this shit. Yeah, very patient, definitely.
Yeah. And she says as much, that this is her reward for her patience. So she knows what she's doing.
Do you think the villain's plot was a little disappointing in that it relied a lot on coincidence and patience and kind of unrealistic factors like that?
No, because I'm pretty smart, like a detective, and I'm not allowed to believe in coincidence.
Okay.
The way Nolan decided to also incorporate the No Man's Land storyline from the comics into the movie was also pretty exciting. Instead of an earthquake that destroyed Gotham, though, it was bombs. And it was a pretty effective strategy to get Gotham citizens to turn on one another. I'm sure the Joker would have been proud, because he didn't come close to doing as much damage to Gotham as Bane did.
Oh yeah, I loved all the No Man's Land stuff here. That was really well done.
Yeah, No Man's Land is probably like one of my top 5 favorite Batman storylines of all time.
Well, it's like one of the worst things that you could do to Gotham.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of the Joker, I do wish they would have mentioned the Joker at least once, like at least a passing reference. It's one of the film's many sins, I feel. Like continuity-wise, with The Dark Knight, it's almost a plot hole, and it's not the film's only one. Like, how does Batman suddenly know to appear in certain locations, like to save Catwoman, to save John Blake? Or how did Bruce Wayne get back into Gotham after escaping the pit? Or why did Miranda Tate fuck Bruce Wayne?
That's a good question. She has needs, man.
I guess.
Just as an extra bit of betrayal there, I have no idea.
Exactly. Really? Like, is that betrayal? That's awesome. But all of these, like, negative things aside, there probably isn't a superhero film with better cinematography.
Oh, no.
This film is gorgeous.
Christopher Nolan knows how to use the camera to frame shots, to move it within a scene. I think he did a much better job of shooting action here than he did in films like Batman Begins.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You definitely see him progress as an action director in the course of these 3 Batman films.
And he definitely brought the spectacle for this film, too, with things like the Bat plane or the Bat or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Seeing that thing cruise through, the Gotham skyscrapers, dodging these missiles and stuff like that. I was so happy. I was so happy in the movie theater watching that. It's like things I'd never seen before in a superhero film. There is, of course, one glaring thing that we're not talking about that I would say most people complain about in this movie, and that is Bane. So let's talk more about him in our character breakdown, starting with Batman. This was Christian Bale's final performance as Bruce Wayne / Batman, and up to the very last scenes, he nailed the role. Like, I've argued that Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman are more comic accurate, but I don't think I've cared more for Batman as a character than when Christian Bale played him, gravelly voice and all.
Yeah, the gravelly voice was a little extra gravelly in this movie, but Christian Bale's a brilliant actor. I think he plays a large part in why these films are so successful.
Yeah, I think they're so successful because they're ultimately just the story of a man who has decided to make these decisions, and the stories really focus on him, which is nice for a Batman film because oftentimes people want to focus on the villains, but I don't think Christopher Nolan really ever fell into that trap. Batman has always been, in his movies, one of the most interesting characters.
Yeah, these films never failed to portray the human side of the character, which is really nice. I mean, it does also make it seem like Ben Affleck's Batman would beat the utter shit out of Christian Bale's Batman.
Yeah.
But you'd also feel more empathy for Christian Bale's Batman getting the shit beat out of him, like he did with Bane here.
It's true.
Yeah.
Now, Bruce Wayne starts off the film 8 years retired and broken after the events of The Dark Knight. He has nothing to live for, and his arc is really about finding that thing to live for. That's Alfred's dream for him, explicitly, that he would live a normal, healthy life and not going out and risking it. You definitely see the consequences of Bruce's decision to become a Batman throughout the Dark Knight trilogy, as I've said before. The League of Shadows pushed him to his physical limits in Batman Begins. The Joker put the entirety of Gotham through the psychological ringer in The Dark Knight. But Bane goes deeper, attacking body and mind and soul. But it's through Bane's actions and torture that Batman realizes he does fear death, because in death, he wouldn't be able to save Gotham and his loved ones from madmen like Bane. In recognizing that, he discovers that a fear of death and a healthy survival instinct can push him beyond his limits. And that makes his ultimate sacrifice that much more meaningful, because he did it in spite of his fear. Now, it was kind of a cheap twist at the end, I felt, when it was revealed that he didn't sacrifice his life, but no one else knew that but Alfred and Selina, and maybe Lucius. But to everyone else, it was very meaningful. As cheap as the twist was, I do like seeing Bruce happy. I do ultimately like that ending for him. His entire 3-film arc has always been about learning to pick himself up after he falls, and to see his soul rise out of the darkness and anger he kept himself in to be Batman is cathartic and a fantastic ending.
It was interesting that he made the decision to establish a protege knowing that the fight still needed to be fought despite the fact that he was no longer in the game. In my mind, I think the story would continue with him eventually coming out of retirement to fight alongside Robin, who probably became some iteration of Nightwing or something.
Maybe after he had a daughter in Helena or something like that, you know, and then he could train her, or I don't know, but I could totally see that. I would love to see the story continue.
Who's Helena?
Helena is the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle.
Oh, Huntress.
Yeah.
Yeah. A version of Huntress.
Right. The first version of Huntress. Moving on to Tom Hardy as Bane. Make fun of Tom Hardy's Bane voice and mannerisms all you like. He gave an amazing performance and was just as unrecognizable in the role as Heath Ledger was as the Joker. I do have to wonder, though, what the hell were he and Christopher Nolan thinking with the voice? Like, that shit is still embarrassing to this day, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real here. The character is a force of nature as he's written. He's so damn smart and cunning and brutal, but pairing those aspects with that voice that sounds like Super Mario is so ripe for parody that they never should have done it. Imagine how much better this movie would have been if he just went with a regular sinister voice and not like,
I was born in the shadows, molded by it.
I don't think he sounds like Mario so much as he sounds like Topol from Fiddler on the Roof. It's just, I don't get it. Allegedly, he said in interviews that the voice's main inspiration was from a famous gypsy boxer, but there were apparently like a number of other inspirations, including
Mario.
Latin, that helped him settle on Bane's voice.
Well, yes, it's a Romani accent, but it's not just that. It also has this weird affect to it. So it's this weird mashup of things that is ultimately distracting.
I have seen in an interview about Christopher Nolan's initial reaction to Tom Hardy's Bane voice, where he was like, what is that? But he said that like after listening to it for a while, he just couldn't move away from it. So they ultimately settled with it.
It was probably more like, what the fuck is that?
Tom, let's stop it. Let's hear the real voice.
This is my real voice. It's a me, Bane.
Now, Bane in the comics has been described as being stronger and just as smart as Batman. I know that initially, after the success of The Dark Knight, Warner Brothers pushed for Christopher Nolan to cast Leonardo DiCaprio as the Riddler, but Nolan figured the Riddler was just Joker light, and that someone like Bane would be able to pose both a physical and mental challenge for Batman. Also, with Bane's history with the League of Assassins in the comics as Ra's al Ghul's potential successor, this allowed Nolan to revisit the League of Shadows from Batman Begins, as well as the themes of fear and justice from that film. So it's kind of nice that Rises kind of comes full circle with Begins.
I don't know. I think the fact that the villain's goal was primarily a copy of the first film's villain's goal was a little less exciting compared to getting this new motivation, like how the Joker was in The Dark Knight.
Dude, but Bane was so much more successful and extreme than Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul burned down a house. Bane freaking blew up an island. Like, Bane was all about extremism, like pushing people toward revolution, arming nuclear bombs, destroying souls, all in service to the Al Ghul legacy. Christopher Nolan approached to the character as a classic movie monster specifically, but with a brain, just this unstoppable force. I don't think you could describe Ra's al Ghul in the same way.
Blah, 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 blow up Gotham City, the cleansing fire, blah, blah, blah.
Gosh. Now, I know people don't love Bane's look, and as much as I personally would have preferred a more faithful adaptation, I also don't think the luchador look would have worked. Like, I've seen tons and tons of sketches from the film's production team on how to adapt the comics mask into Nolan's universe, and they all really did look pretty silly.
Well, they're definitely hampered by their own gritty, realistic takes on the characters.
Yeah, I thought the mask design they ended up with is actually pretty cool.
I don't like how it gave the appearance of like mandibles.
No, that's what was cool about it. It was almost like a spider's mouth or something like that.
It just didn't seem like Bane to me.
No,
and the fact that they never addressed like Venom, the Venom steroid that he takes, and instead the mask just served as this painkiller gas mask kind of thing.
Right. And that was pretty interesting. I think that was a pretty cool adaptation, and that he was strong because he didn't feel pain. I thought that was brilliant, actually. I also have to commend Tom Hardy for getting freaking stacked for this role.
Yeah,
Holy shit. You always hear stories of how Christian Bale is drastically altering his weight for roles. Tom Hardy, too.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
was crazy. Moving on to Anne Hathaway as Selena Kyle slash Catwoman. I freaking love Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I love her performance. I love the take on the character. I love the look, just everything. If I could give a star rating to individual characters, I would give her 5 stars. Catwoman has always been a really cool character, like a smooth con artist, but also this lethal femme fatale, and I think Anne captured that perfectly.
Yeah, I think Zoe Kravitz will have an uphill battle competing with Anne Hathaway. I definitely think she could pull it off, though, because Zoe Kravitz looks to be even more true to the physical appearance of Selena Kyle than Anne Hathaway does.
Right.
That being said, Anne Hathaway hit all the right beats she was supposed to with this character. And I thought she did a good job of being believable when it came to kicking ass, especially with those, like, knife stilettos. That was crazy.
Oh, yeah. I thought the goggle cat ears was a brilliant design choice, and as much as I missed the claws, I definitely also liked the knife stiletto heels. Those could not have been easy to move in, and yet Anne did. In fact, she did a lot of her own stunts and fighting in them.
That's crazy.
She's just a badass actress. I really like what they did with her relationship with Batman. Like, she isn't intimidated by Batman, and she doesn't really care who Bruce Wayne is. And I think that's part of his attraction to her. Like, she's interesting, and she throws him for a loop.
Yeah, and it seemed like she was into him, especially with those 2 kisses that she gave him. But I never really got the sense that he was too romantically attracted to her. So it was kind of surprising at the end of the movie when it turns out, they're like living together in Paris or whatever.
I mean, I figured Bruce Wayne is a pretty lonely guy.
But in the comics, he has romantic leanings. And with Rachel Dawes, he definitely did. And with Catwoman, she was just kind of like there until the moment that they were living together.
I think the attraction was mutual. I definitely think that. Now, the film juggles a lot of characters, so it was nice to have a simple arc and approach to Catwoman. She was a criminal who was looking for a way out with a program that could easily erase her identity from every server and record and device in the world. It didn't really tie into the central conflict in any way, but she herself was the catalyst for Bruce Wayne, leaving retirement, and she was his happy ending at the end of his journey. Let's move on to Joseph Gordon-Levitt as John Blake.
Robin? Wait, is it Robin John Blake or John Robin Blake?
It's Robin John Blake.
Okay.
He's really a mishmash of Dick Grayson and Tim Drake, characters who have had the mantle of Robin in the comics. Like Dick, Blake was an orphan who became a police officer, and like Tim, he was a natural detective who was able to figure out Batman's secret identity on his own. I remember hating and being really surprised that Blake was able to figure out Bruce Wayne was Batman the first time I saw the film, until I got to the end of the movie and they threw in that twist that Blake's real name was Robin. I actually really appreciated that surprise, and I thought it was a really clever way of getting Robin into this Batman universe, if it wasn't altogether faithful to the source material.
Why the twist, though? Why couldn't they just have called him Dick Grayson? It didn't need to be a surprise.
I think for a number of reasons. He was, again, supposed to be a mishmash of different Robins, so he wasn't supposed to be specifically Dick. He wasn't supposed to be specifically Tim. If they did call him Dick Grayson, then they'd have to, talk about his upbringing in the circus. Bruce Wayne wasn't his adoptive father. They'd have to explain that. It's just easier to create an original character sometimes, I think. Now, Blake starts off as a rookie GCPD cop who's interested in Batman, and through some solid detective work, he became a critical ally to Commissioner Gordon in this movie. He's kind of along for the ride throughout a lot of the film, but he has this critical character moment at the end when he's trying to save a busload of orphans and ordinary citizens across the bridge to safety. But a cop, like him, decides to follow orders and blow up the bridge. John yells at him, "You idiot! You've killed us! You're just following orders!" Right after that, he witnesses his hero sacrifice himself, and disillusioned, he tosses his badge into the sea. He learned in that moment a lesson that Gordon tried explaining to him during Bane's speech in front of Blackgate, that sometimes a cop is shackled by their orders and regulations. Which isn't a great message, especially in contemporary context, but it makes sense for a place as corrupt as Gotham, I would suppose. And actually, it was the one thing I thought was missing in this film, the corruption within Gotham's police force, which was pretty prevalent in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. But Blake, in the end, gets to be the new Batman, or Nightwing, or whatever he wants to be, because as the film suggests multiple times, Batman, as a symbol, could be anybody.
Do you think anyone could be Batman, though?
I'm kind of torn on this whole thing because they showed in The Dark Knight that not anybody could be Batman. Anyone who puts on hockey pads and a cowl can't do the same job, you know?
But he's not wearing hockey pads. And at the end of the movie, Robin gets upgraded to more than hockey pads, I guess.
Yes, for sure.
So as long as they have access to Fox's armory, then they could be Batman, right? Is that the message?
I mean, I think I could be,
Yeah.
if you're asking.
I wasn't asking.
I could be Batman.
Think you need to do a few more push-ups.
The fuck does that mean? What are you saying?
Dude, if I could kick your ass,
What?
anybody could.
Shut. First of all, you can't. Second of all, I'm Batman.
Okay.
Moving on to Marion Cotillard as Miranda Tate / Talia al Ghul. As we mentioned, her reveal as Talia was the worst kept secret in a DC film to date. Actors are professional liars, people. Remember that? You can't trust them during interviews. I think we learned that all again with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire this past year. Ultimately, I was really happy to see her character pop up in the film, though. Talia is a really cool and complex character in the comics, and they did such a good job of introducing her father, Ra's al Ghul, in the first movie that you immediately get the severity of the situation when you learn the League of Shadows and Talia al Ghul are in Gotham.
Yeah, if you don't know much about Talia, listen to our Daughters of the Demon versus Daughters of the Dragon duel episode.
Yeah. They gave her Bane's origin from the comics, though, in this movie. You know, she was born in a prison. I didn't actually mind that, though, because I thought the legend that they developed around her and Bane's past was really well done.
Yeah.
Her pregnant mother took her father's place in the pit prison, the worst prison in the world, though she had a protector there in Bane, who Ra's al Ghul excommunicated from the League of Shadows, as he was a reminder of the hell where his wife died and his daughter had been raised in. Giving Talia that surprise twist at the end, like her father's twist in the first film, was a nice way of, again, bringing the films full circle. Her arc was about legacy and completing the destiny of her father to destroy Gotham City. I do think that it did rob some agency from Bane as a character in that he was kind of just a stooge of Talia. You know, Bane in the comics definitely is not that. He's definitely his own powerful force to be reckoned with. But I'm conflicted because it also is kind of cool to have the leader of the League of Assassins or the League of Shadows sort of orchestrating everything from behind the shadows.
Yeah, I thought it made sense. And I don't think it necessarily took away from Bane because you could tell that he was really smart in his own right.
And just as dedicated.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't have much more to say about the cast. Regarding Michael Caine as Alfred Pennyworth, Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, and Gary Oldman as James Gordon, I don't have much more to say about their performances. Not anything that I haven't said in other reviews, but I'll just reiterate that they nail their roles as usual.
Legends. Fucking legends, all of them.
Totally. They're all fantastic actors, and I think Michael Caine especially delivered some very emotional and moving moments in this film. But let's get into the plot breakdown. The film starts off with Bane and the League of Shadows hijacking a CIA plane and kidnapping a nuclear physicist who discovered a way to weaponize a fusion reactor. This opening was like straight out of a James Bond film. So cool, shot with IMAX cameras. It was breathtaking.
It shows that it makes a difference when action is filmed using practical effects.
Oh, yeah.
Because when that plane is destroyed in real life, you could tell it's just that much more impressive in scale.
Yeah, practical action shot on film, there's no comparison. That is the best. During the 8-year anniversary of Harvey Dent's death, Commissioner Gordon considers revealing the truth of Harvey Dent's actions as Two-Face, but decides not to in order to maintain Gotham's peace. We also learn Miranda Tate helped Wayne Enterprises invest in a clean energy fusion reactor that was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Selina Kyle steals the reclusive Bruce Wayne's fingerprints and his mother's pearls from his safe. I loved this introduction of Selina Kyle. I thought she was a total badass, the way she flipped out of that window in heels and then like quickly transformed from her maid's disguise to just like a socialite. So cool.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Selina sells Bruce's fingerprints to Wayne Enterprises board member John Daggett in exchange for a clean slate program. She's double-crossed, but manages to alert the police, who chased after Daggett's men into the sewers, where Commissioner Gordon is kidnapped by the League of Shadows. Commissioner Gordon escapes, injured, and is rescued by Officer John Blake. With Gordon hospitalized, Blake confronts Bruce Wayne with an appeal to return as Batman. I also loved the scene with Selina Kyle outsmarting and then outacting her way out of the whole situation with the cops and Daggett's men.
Yeah. Did you think it was crazy how Congressman Gilly was Bruce Wayne's dad in the Joker movie?
I totally forgot that he was in this film. I definitely did a double take. I was like, yo, dude, that's Thomas Wayne.
Yeah. You think they would have reconsidered hiring him for the Joker movie, considering he had kind of a large part in this movie?
Well, originally that was supposed to be Alec Baldwin, if you remember, but it looks like they dodged a bullet there. Zing.
Too soon.
Too soon? Shit. Bane and the League storm Gotham Stock Exchange and use Bruce's fingerprints to approve his purchase of some worthless stock, depleting his fortune.
Now, do you think that plan required so little tact and stealth? I feel like hacking into a system to thwart Wayne Enterprises' stocks is something that could have been a little bit more clandestine than freaking shooting up the exchange.
You know, it doesn't help that you don't really understand their plan until later on in the movie, and you're not quite sure what's going on at the time. In hindsight, yeah, I would say it's definitely over the top. But it was still a cool scene. It was Batman's reintroduction in the film. You know, it was the first time we were seeing him because he gives chase to the bad guys, but doesn't capture them in time and is instead hunted by the police over the death of Harvey Dent. Catwoman learns the clean slate program is a myth when she tries to steal it from Daggett and is surrounded by Bane's men, who she takes down with the help from Batman. Now, Alfred, in an effort to stop Bruce from taking on Bane, reveals that Rachel Dawes chose Harvey Dent over Bruce. Alfred resigns, leaving Bruce alone just before he's ousted from his own company, which he left in the care of Miranda Tate, to whom Bruce revealed that the fusion reactor they built actually did work, but could be weaponized. Batman tracks down Bane with Catwoman's help, only to be defeated by Bane and imprisoned with a broken back in a deep pit prison on the other side of the world.
What did you think of the broken bat scene?
It wasn't as shocking as it was in the comic, I think, because it was done so quickly and in shadow, but I'm definitely glad they included it. I, for a time, didn't think that they were going to.
I thought it was a great scene. I don't understand what gadget Batman threw at Bane.
It was like a shotgun of like smoke bombs. They just like went everywhere.
And then did nothing.
Well, because it's Bane. For anyone else, they would be like, oh shit, oh, all around me.
Also, he was talking about how he was like born in the darkness and how he never knew the light until he was an adult man. And at that point, it was just blinding. But I remember seeing how well lit that pit prison was. You know, they had the sun coming through the top of the well and everything. And they somehow implied that he had like night vision or something. That was weird.
Yeah, and it turns out that he wasn't even the one that was born in the prison. You know, that was Talia. I don't know if they were just playing up on the fact that people were confusing her legend with him or whatever. I don't know. But speaking of the prison, I actually did really like the design of it. It was very evocative of the well that Bruce Wayne fell in as a child during the first movie. And seeing him climb out of that, I think, was a strong allegory for him, like, rising out of the darkness.
Oh, yeah, it was the best part of the film, definitely. Just seeing him go without the rope, you know, and then making that jump. It was just awe-inspiring, as good hero stories are.
Yeah, he was literally giving it his all. If he would have fallen, he would have died, you know.
Yeah. Que, pasa, que, pasa.
I'm actually in the movie. My voice is in the movie. As part of the marketing campaign for The Dark Knight Rises, they had fans record the deshi, basara line to be a part of like the whole chorus. So I just want to put that out there.
Oh, I didn't realize I was in the presence of a SAG card holder.
There you go. I mean, uncredited, of course, but I'm there.
Okay.
Somewhere. Blake arrests Selina before Bane sets off explosives all around Gotham that imprison all of its police officers in the sewers, where they were looking for him. Bane reveals to Gotham that he has armed a fusion reactor and that it will be detonated if any of them try to leave the city. He releases all of the prisoners from Blackgate Prison and stokes an uprising by the lower class. I do think probably one of the most ridiculous scenes of this movie, and I thought this even the first time I watched it, was seeing Bane read that letter on top of the tumbler in front of the prison. It's silly, honestly. As Gordon, Blake, and the remaining police officers try to find the fusion bomb, Bruce Wayne manages to recover in prison and escape the pit.
You know what the silliest thing was, honestly, and probably the biggest plot hole that bothers me about this film is how Commissioner Gordon literally sent every single one of his police officers into the sewers, all at the same time. He didn't send them like in waves or anything like that. 3,000 police officers. No one else, I guess, was on patrol or anything like that. He sent them all into the sewers. That was stupid.
Well, he knew that Bane had an army down there. He didn't want to send like small groups of police officers because then they would just get taken out by the army. They were hunting an army in the sewers.
I don't think that was a choice that Commissioner Gordon would have actually made. I think it was made for the purposes of the plot.
You could argue that, but I don't think it's as big of a plot hole as you claim it is. He had trust in his police force that they could find and take down Bane's men.
He couldn't send in 2,000 officers. He had to send in all 3,000.
Dude, that network was huge. You saw it on the map.
Oh my God.
Bitch, you don't know Jim Gordon's life? As Gordon, Blake, and the remaining police try to find the fusion bomb, Bruce Wayne manages to recover in prison and escape the pit. After returning to Gotham, Batman gives Catwoman the clean slate program before rescuing the police from the sewers and creating a signal jammer with Lucius Fox to prevent the bomb's detonation. The police go to war against the League of Shadows, and Batman defeats Bane in combat, only to learn that Miranda Tate is actually Talia al Ghul and the one really in charge of the League of Shadows this whole time.
Did you find it interesting to see Batman fighting in broad daylight, leading the charge in a ground battle?
I actually thought that was really super fucking epic, and I'm glad they shot it during the day. It just had so much more atmosphere, and it would have been really hard to see things at night.
You have to wonder, though, at this point, when he's like beating the shit out of Bane and sometimes getting the shit beat out of him during that fight, at that point, just use a gun. You know, honestly, when the fate of the city is at stake, you know, it's going to be blown up in less than an hour, and there are a bunch of guns lying around from the mercenaries and from the police officers. Just shoot Bane at that point. You don't need to punch him in the face over and over. You just fucking shoot him. Yeah, we get it. You don't use guns, but your city's about to be destroyed. Just shoot him.
That kind of makes more sense for Bane. Like, why didn't Bane just pick up a gun?
That's true, too. I have no idea.
I mean, Batman actually does shoot and kill someone in this movie with bullets. In the Bat, when he's trying to divert the direction of the truck, he shoots bullets through the truck's front windshield and kills the driver.
That's right.
And people complain about Zack Snyder. While Talia leaves to investigate why the bomb isn't being detonated, Catwoman kills Bane, then helps Batman find the bomb. A lot of people complain that Catwoman stole Bane's defeat in like a very anticlimactic way, but Bane and Batman had already fought again, and they'd already determined like who the champion was. It was Batman.
Yeah.
Unable to stop the bomb from going off, Batman carries the bomb away in his Bat aerial vehicle and is apparently caught in the blast over the ocean. As the remains of Bruce's estate are bequeathed, John Blake learns he has been given the Batcave. At a cafe in Florence, Italy, meanwhile, Alfred spots Bruce and Selina happy.
And don't forget that Lucius Fox learns that Bruce Wayne fixed the autopilot system on the Bat.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people speculate that perhaps Alfred imagined the whole thing in Florence, that Batman actually did die. But to them, I would say, then why include the whole autopilot scene?
Yeah, we know the autopilot's fixed, and then we see him at the end. That's what happened. I mean, it's more poetic to think that he died, but they included that scene for a reason.
Right.
So basically what happened was that he ejected long before it got really out over the water.
What I don't get is why he told Commissioner Gordon and Selina Kyle that he didn't fix the autopilot right before attaching the bomb to the Bat. I think maybe he was trying to make everyone believe that he was going to die. Like he really did want to stop being Batman and this was his way out, so he just lied to everyone.
That's an interesting theory. Kind of a weird plot point if that's the case.
Yeah. Now, you may have noticed that there were a lot of little scenes that I left out of the plot breakdown, like Alfred initially telling Bruce how he used to visit Florence, or Lucius initially revealing the Bat vehicle to Bruce, Bruce dancing with Selina, or getting busy with Talia. Nearly all of these scenes, I would say, are still necessary as they provide important information and context that drive the story forward toward its conclusion. It's a very complex story, and I think while it may sometimes get tripped up a bit or not provide all of the details the audiences wanted up front, overall, I appreciate the hell out of how smart this film is. And while it's not as good as The Dark Knight or as well-paced as Batman Begins, the film is still, in my opinion, an epic masterstroke by Christopher Nolan and a deep, meaningful conclusion to his Batman saga. I'd like to give the film 4.5 stars, but I'm settling for 4 because for a story so caught up in all of the finer details, it misses some important ones. And because as much as I like Nolan's interpretation of the characters, this one, of any of the films, is the least faithful to the source material for seemingly little reason. Specifically, characters like Bane and John Blake.
Yeah, I think if I were to rank this Nolan trilogy, it would definitely go The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, then The Dark Knight Rises. And yeah, the last movie is the lesser of the other two, but it's still a damn good trilogy.
Yeah, it was really like the very first successful superhero trilogy out there.
Where all 3 installments were good.
Yeah, really good.
I agree. 4 stars. No, actually, never mind. 3.5 stars.
Oh.
You keep doing that to me. Punk ass.
You know The Dark Knight Rises is not 3.5 stars.
4 stars is your rating. 3.5 stars is my rating.
Too late, you already said 4.
Fuck you. Do you feel like you're in charge?
That does it for this review. Let us know what you thought about the movie by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find links to all of our accounts by checking out our show notes or visiting our website, dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you can also find a link to our Patreon page where we offer bonus content, including bonus episodes and duels, monthly live movie watch-alongs, collectible pin sets, and access to our Discord server. Check it out right after this episode. Our lowest tier is only $2 a month.
In our next episode, as somewhat of a tie-in to this Batman movie, we are going to pit the Batman villain Firefly against the Vulture, the Spider-Man villain who was the main baddie in Spider-Man Homecoming. Firefly will actually be the main bad guy in the Batgirl movie.
But that does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, John Speas, Ken Johnson, Jace Crump, John Starosky, Zachary Hepburn, John Bechinina, Mitchell Phipps, Dustyn Balcom, Salvador Hernandez-Contreras Jr., and Levi Yeaton for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up and away!
True believers.